anyone who is doing anything in business, I have a fundamental view that unless you are prepared to basically be addicted to it for at least a 5-year period, like it consumes you, you do it 6 days a week, 16 hours a day, you think about it, you sleep with it in your mind, you talk about it.
Yeah.
Unless you're prepared to go through that hurt locker, it's not going to amount to much.
Cathro and Partners presents The Cut, a podcast about all things insolvency. Hi, Andrew Blundell here, Cathro and Partners. Today's episode of The Cut, we're very, very lucky to have a guy that I've done a lot of work with over the years, a guy that I respect a lot, and someone that I enjoy going at runs with in the eastern suburbs, particularly when he makes me go 30 Ks instead of 10. Nick Hitchens, the main man at Hitch Advisory, legal firm based in Bondi Junction. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's a pleasure.
Oh, mate, always.
I think I only managed to run that far once, so I don't think you
It
can
was
complain.
once. It was
come
once.
on, it's not too bad.
Yeah, that's true. It's usually 10K, so I'll give you that.
But we get a lot of work done, so they're good runs.
We do. We solve all the world's problems on those runs. The way we like to do these things, Nick, is to just ask a little bit about you, how you became to be the main guy at Hitch Advisory, a bit about your journey. So over to you.
Thanks. Well, look, it's interesting because 10 years in business can go exceptionally quickly, and 2025 marks our 10th year at Hitch Advisory.
Wow.
And I guess what got us there was just a really broad, random career before that. I knew I always wanted to be in business for myself, and I've probably known that since I was 10 years old.
Yep.
But I didn't know what that business would look like.
Sure.
And if you ask me 25 odd plus years later, whether it would be a law firm, I probably would have laughed, but here we are. In terms of my legal career, that was just as broad. So I started buying and selling pubs in Melbourne and nightclubs and applying for poker machine licenses and things of that nature, which was interesting. I think the thing with buying and selling pubs is you work for some really out there characters, often in financial distress.
Yep.
And obviously the regulatory overlap of liquor licensing and gaming regulation as well. So it was a really, really good place to cut my teeth.
Yep.
And then I moved pretty promptly into a firm that was a general commercial firm, but I basically was given the task of handling all of the insolvency spec matters.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah. So again, I sort of self-taught I was self-taught in terms of preference claims, voidable transactions, insolvent trading claims. And I love a deal. So whilst we'd commence proceedings, I was always about getting to mediation as quick as possible, which in Melbourne is pretty easily done.
Yep.
Far less adversarial city than Sydney. I think in Sydney, everyone wants to go to trial or hearing. Whereas in Melbourne, everyone wants to cut a deal over a coffee and quickly go to dinner or go for a beer afterwards. So Melbourne definitely suited my style of litigation better. We got quick outcomes, everyone won, everyone got paid, and we moved on. Whereas Sydney's a little bit more cutthroat. Maybe we can come back to that later. But I then came to Sydney and another flipping career into private mergers and acquisitions. So anything, in that sort of mid-market sort of mergers and acquisition space from sort of 20 to 100 mil. There were bus companies, there were manufacturing companies at that time, because we still manufactured in Australia at that time.
Shock, yeah.
There were technology companies, there were gym and protein sort of supplement companies. So, every sort of M&A deal, as long as it was founder led or owned, we were buying and selling it, working closely with corporate advisors, accountants, and business brokers.
Yep.
So I guess by that stage I was still relatively young in a legal sense. A lot of people don't really have a legal career until they're in their 40s and 50s and even into their 60s and 70s. But at that point in time I was in my late 20s, and I kind of thought, well, this is the time to either start a business and fail, or start a business and do okay. And fortunately for us, we've done okay.
Yeah, 10 years before 40, own shop, obviously going well, and And like everyone, we've got our challenges in terms of business. If you could give a founder, particularly someone who's in the legal space, some advice as to, obviously based on your experience and how you've got to your 10-year mark, what would it be?
You have to learn to let go. So the legal industry is key person dependent, not dissimilar to insolvency or accounting or any other professional service.
Yeah.
And often what you find with that is that we are perfectionists and we want to get it right, and only we know the technicalities, and only we know how to get the answer. But that's actually not true. Mm-hmm. If you empower people pretty quickly, basically give them free rein to make some mistakes, then you will find that it'll take 5, 6, 7 years, but after that time, you will find that you can basically actively delegate tasks and jobs to people, and they'll probably do a better job than you in the end.
Yeah, right. And like I have the same challenge in my own business, right? We've been going 3.5, nearly 4 years now, but it's that letting go piece and the delegation piece that I have to keep reminding myself of in terms of making sure that I empower my people to do that. And yeah, that's great advice in terms of someone looking to build their own practice, whether it's legal or otherwise. I know you're a good Tassie boy. Tell me a little bit about your background from that side of things. Obviously, Tasmania is still part of Australia, although often people don't think it is from time to time. Give me a bit of a sense as to how you're growing up, or how your background has kind of influenced where you've got to today.
Yeah, so I think I'm very lucky in that regard. Though I don't walk into a meeting and people say, "What school did you go to?" and then I have to give some awkward response because the school isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Tassie, 25, 30 years ago is just a big country town.
Yeah.
And there was really not a lot of need for lawyers, because if someone gave you their word that they'd provide a service or they'd deliver something, then they'd do it.
Yeah.
And then if you knew the price, you'd pay them either on the day in cash or promptly thereafter.
Yep.
So in those regional and country towns, people are pretty good to their word. As a generalisation, if somebody tells you they're going to do something, they will do it.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the first lesson that I've taken into life generally. Whatever you say you're going to do, just stick to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really, really, really important sort of value to take into business. Sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes the game shifts a little bit, but ultimately come back to what you promised to deliver and deliver it.
Yep.
The other good thing about Tassie from a less sort of moral or grandstanding position is just the fact that in a country town you have to make your own fun.
Yep.
So whether that's by going fishing, doing things like going fishing and diving, riding mountain bikes, riding motorbikes, building forts and cubbies and stuff in the bush, you have to make your own fun. And I think, unfortunately, we've lost a lot of that with technology. So now fun is playing a game or scrolling or exactly, getting on a bright light of a screen. And what you actually, I don't know about you, but what I find is after about 15, 20 minutes, sometimes if you deep down the doom scroll 30 minutes later, actually you can feel it in your brain that it doesn't actually feel very healthy. It doesn't feel very fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you have one beer too many, you feel like, geez, I really need to put this down now.
Yeah.
Whereas in the country, what you learn is that real fun is about getting out in fresh air. It's about connection with people. It's about having some hobbies outside of making money and outside of work. And I think, big cliche, but certainly the most enjoyable things are outside, and they're probably created or in some way connected with nature.
Yeah.
And I think that helps me to realise that there's a lot more than making cash in Sydney. Although I like that as well.
Don't we all? I think the other thing, and I'm obviously from the country myself too, so I can completely understand your point of view from that side of things. Creativity is something that you would have learnt as part of that growing up and making your own fun process, right? And I think a lot of people are losing that and the ability to interact with other individuals because everything's via a screen.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that, because in our recruitment process, we look for creativity, and you might say, well, how do you look for that? Like, people aren't doing a charcoal sketch on their resume.
Yeah.
But I find, I'm interested in your views. I find that the way I look for creativity in a CV is, can we see some kind of hardship in life? Like, for example, has the person migrated? Can we see that the person's had some other sort of challenge in life? What can we see in relation to their casual work history?
Yep.
Can we see that they've worked, a heap of random jobs in hospitality or the service industry, which is probably going to tell us that they've got a problem-solving / creative ability.
And a good work ethic.
Good work ethic. And in addition to that, they know the value of customer service.
Yeah.
So I think, creativity, work ethic, customer service, find that in their broader CV or their life experience.
Yep.
You're 90% of the way to a good team member.
Particularly, and I do this in my own interview process at a lower level when it's an entry-level position or a year or two experience. Yes, I've got to tick the fact that they're doing their degree or they've started their CA or CPA or they're intending to do that. But how do they interact with you as a person? Like, sitting across the desk, you can usually tell more about someone in 10 minutes just conversing with them than you'll ever get off a piece of paper. And 9 times out of 10, I think I make pretty decent decisions when it comes to eyeballing someone and having that conversation and understanding that to and fro connection piece. And it's you can't always get that out of a CV.
I think that's right. And I think the other thing that's really interesting, right, is we lived from March, April 2020 through to the back end of 2021. I can't recall. But we were good for a good couple of years in Sydney where all or most interactions were via a screen. And a video screen, in terms of that assessment, that kind of body language, that emotional intelligence, what energy do I pick up from you? What energy do you pick up from me? I sound a bit like a hippie, and perhaps I am. But my best estimate is that the reduction on your efficiency to gauge a character via a video is probably 40% less than this human interaction. Yeah. I don't know, but that's my best guess.
No, I reckon you're onto something there, and it's even just thinking about the people that we have employed during that period, and obviously we didn't get the opportunity to sit down like we are now before we decided, hey, come on board, that there's a gap between those people and the way that they've developed as professionals as opposed to someone that had been sitting in the office and listening to me on the phone or listen to you ring up me and yell at me for something that we probably both know that we need to deal with but is difficult to deal with.
Yes.
And it's that interaction and that osmosis almost of hearing all of those conversations and understanding, oh, hang on, that's how Andrew dealt with that, or that's how Nick dealt with that. They take that into their next telephone call without even thinking about it. It's just there. Yeah. And if you're working from home or you're behind a screen, you don't have that interaction, it definitely has an impact on people's development.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we, as an employer in the professional services space, we'd be absolutely naive or stupid to think that we aren't going to have a work from home policy.
Yeah,
and I think from my perspective, work from home, what would it mean to me if I could define it in some kind of shape or form? Would be being able to go and go away for a weekend early if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It'd be starting late because you went to a concert or a theatre show the night before.
Yeah.
It'd be finishing earlier to go to football or netball or yoga or some other kind of active pursuit. I like organic work from home as opposed to this kind of forced, every Monday and Thursday I work from home, don't bother me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We've got a strict 3-2 policy for people that live in Sydney. We've made some exceptions for people that live overseas and regionally.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people are using it.
Yeah.
I would say that maybe 10% of the team actually work from home on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's not our rule, just there must be something that they're getting from also being in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got 4-in-1 kind of similar thing, but you're right. Some people are still taking advantage of it, and great, that's for them to do if that's what they want to do, and obviously helps them. But you've got to trust your people, and it's if you can't trust them to be working from home, then they're probably not the right person for you anyway.
Yes.
And that it's finding that balance. And I think you're right in terms of the organic thing. If I've got a concert I'm going on a Thursday night, perhaps I'll start late on Friday or work from home or whatever it might be. Yep. If we can empower our people to make those decisions and communicate that with us, it puts you in a way better position. They're way more efficient. They're engaged. All of those things that you're looking for in a good employee anyway, right?
I totally agree. I think that's fundamentally it. Empower them, treat them with respect, let them find their own adventure.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to get the lowest common denominator from times that you have to pull up and call in and have a chat to. But I think the majority of people actually take pride in their work. They take pride in how they present themselves. They want to excel in their careers, particularly when you're dealing with tertiary educated people like you and I are.
Yeah.
I'd be less excited about work from home if I ran a tech company or a large bank or something where time recording wasn't actually done.
Yeah.
But in our professional services space, you can soon weed out somebody who's sort of making a bit of a joke of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of coming back to your business from a holistic point of view, what are you seeing at the moment? Where do you think it's going to go in the next 12 months? What do you think's going to happen more broadly, particularly with everything that's happening in the world, political and otherwise?
Look, lawyers are very lucky in the sense that if you have both a front-end practice and a litigious or dispute resolution practice, you can kind of avoid the economic cycles to some extent. Some years will obviously be more profitable than others, but you can iron out economic cycles by virtue of you've got an option if people are fighting and suing each other,
yep.
and you've got an option if people are doing deals and going well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what I've found over the last 2 years, 2023 wasn't as bad. The first half of 23, but what I found in the back half of 23 and all of 24 was that we were in this weird position where interest rates had put some pressure into the economy,
mm-hmm.
which meant that our large mergers and acquisition deals had slowed.
Yep.
For example, purchases of larger businesses, private equity firms, sophisticated investors, people doing what we call roll-ups where they'll acquire multiple businesses in one industry.
Yep.
They had less of an appetite for risk because vendor price expectations remained high at 2021, 22 levels post-COVID.
Yep.
But then the cost of capital had gone from sort of, low single digits, nothing. Even on a cash flow lend, you were looking at fours or fives.
Yeah.
All the way up to, 10s, 11s, 12s, the stuff we hadn't seen for years coming back.
Yeah.
So cost of capital was much higher. It was harder to make margin. Deals would go into due diligence. We'd get halfway through due diligence and buy side would pull out. And we saw that again and again and again, both in a property and a corporate M&A perspective in 2024.
Yeah.
Which was frustrating. But then on the other hand, you say, oh, well, that's okay because surely the other side of the cycle means that the insolvency practitioners are flat out and you're doing debt restructures and, people are suing each other left, right and centre,
yep.
chasing each other for money. I don't know what you found, and certainly there was a massive uptick in insolvency appointments.
Yep.
But in terms of people actually pursuing each other to take enforcement action, there was far less appetite to do it. And I don't know if that's just over the last, people have just learnt from their mistakes that sometimes enforcement is not the best path, and sometimes you do need to let people trade out of a bad situation. So we were kind of wedged between a rock and a hard place. People weren't really being forced to the wall, but people weren't also aggressively transacting either.
Yeah, from my side of things, probably May last year is when it started to become a bit more of a wave, shall we say, in terms of just the volume of appointments.
Yep.
I can completely understand where you're coming from in terms of the fact you're kind of caught in the middle.
Yep.
Because it's just typical uncertainty, but there wasn't enough pressure on those people that were needing to force people to come to the table and settle a debt or whatever it might have been to put them in a position where they're forced to take that action. So they're just kind of sitting on the sidelines.
Yes.
And I think now you're seeing proactive. You're seeing more of a proactive stance from people that are pursuing these things, which is again filtering into the types of appointments that I'm getting now, where there's stuff to fight about, or like every other day at the moment, you're seeing the Star, you're seeing building companies, you're seeing manufacturing, you've got the Whyalla Steelworks, like all of these things that are all coming to a head. Probably in 23, kind of into 24, you didn't see that because it just wasn't. People weren't in a position where they were forced to take that kind of action. So I think you'll see, from my point of view, your M&A will start to heat back up now because you've got all of these particular companies that are struggling and are looking for a way out.
Yeah, and it has.
Yeah.
So it definitely, sort of the start of 2025 has taken off on both fronts.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that people have kind of awoken from the slumber. The US election has been had.
Yep.
I'm not sure that the Australian election shifts the dial that much one way or the other. Perhaps it does, but I think people have either sat back and gone, well, we were in trouble, we're still in trouble.
Yep.
We now actually have to do something about it.
Yeah.
Or people have sat back and gone, well, we sat on our cash for all of 23 and achieved nothing, so let's go and find some deals.
Yeah.
Wouldn't necessarily describe them as bargains, but certainly expectation is more realistic and deals are actually happening. There's appetite from a commercial mergers and acquisitions perspective.
Yeah. Is there any particular industries that you're kind of seeing in that space? I know you do a lot in childcare, and you've got some other things that you focus on too, pharmacy.
Yeah, so we do. We certainly focus on those regulated industries of childcare and pharmacy. Childcare is probably the softest it's been for us in 9 years.
Yeah.
And I would say that is because it had a very, very hot run from, in my experience, from sort of 2015, 2016, all the way through to 2023.
Yeah.
It was hot. People were falling over themselves to close a childcare deal.
Yeah.
I think a few things happened last year that slowed childcare. I think the first one was the Productivity Commission reporting and the uncertainty around fee caps and wage increases.
Yeah.
We've seen that play out now, so people kind of know what they're dealing with from a financial modelling or acquisition modelling perspective.
Yeah.
But the other thing we've seen in childcare is the acquirers of those smaller centres. So, there's been sort of 2 or 3 big aggregators of centres in Australia. They've run into a couple of maybe issues is not the right word, but there's been cause for them to slow down their acquisition strategy a little bit. Firstly, they've both gone to market in $1 billion plus deals and have not been successful finding buyers.
Yeah, right.
Or the appetite perhaps hasn't been to their liking. And in addition to that, they've also faced some pressure from the ACCC in terms of saying, well, perhaps we don't like this much aggregation in the industry.
Yeah.
So whereas there were known buyers that a childcare centre would go up for sale, it'd either go into one of the known buyers or fall back to a mum and dad operator that was emerging in the industry.
Yeah.
You're now seeing a lot more mum and dad operators back in that space. Childcare centre will still definitely sell.
Yep.
But it's not that heat that we saw.
Yeah, it's not the competition, and you're not going to get it done tomorrow. You might have a bit longer lead time in terms of getting that across the line.
Pharmacies are another interesting one. They seem to sell at all times.
Yeah.
It's again similar thing. It's regulated, it's closed, it's hard to get into. It's all of those things that when you're buying a business, you go, oh yeah. The difference there is you have to have qualification.
Yeah.
There has to be a pharmacist involved. If we look at our broader M&A portfolio, we're seeing a lot in there's a little bit of sort of distribution and wholesale, sort of that middleman stuff where people further up the trade sale chain are buying.
Yeah.
So less private equity involvement for us, but people further up the food chain and even down the food chain.
Yeah.
So distribution and wholesale we're doing a fair bit in. A lot in that kind of sort of construction and concrete and those kind of building materials as opposed to being building subcontractors, building materials.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of that. Seeing a lot in NDIS. That space is hot. And then a little bit in technology, but technology slowed drastically.
Yeah.
So very broad. Childcare and pharma we see every day of the week. Everything else we might see once a month. In very random forms, but certainly the activity's back.
Yeah, yeah. And then kind of building your team. I know you're always obviously looking for good people. How have you found that from a availability of talent point of view?
That's completely shifted. So if you said to me 18 months ago, can you get a mid-level corporate and commercial lawyer at a reasonable price? The answer would be absolutely categorically no chance.
Unicorns.
Yeah. You'd end up paying somebody with not enough experience, close to a couple of $100,000 a year, and they would be totally underwhelming.
Yeah.
You'd try and get them to autonomously carry a sale of business or a purchase, and their skill set would be very average.
Yeah.
We hired and subsequently let go a few in that camp because the pay they commanded just wasn't commensurate with their skill set. But now we've found it very much swing back the other way.
Yeah.
So if you go to market for that same role now, it's probably $50,000 to $60,000 cheaper.
Yeah, right.
The quality of candidate is far, far superior. They come in, they're hungry, they want to work, they want to learn, they're refreshed by the culture and the environment.
Yep.
I don't know why the shift has been so rapid and drastic, but it certainly has. And I guess the other factor that goes into play there is people will be more attracted to a law firm as it grows.
Yeah.
So as the law firm grows, whereas people will sort of sit back on the sidelines and go, I'm not sure if I want to work there. Now people are very much looking at it and going, yeah, that looks like a good place to work.
Yeah, okay. It's I'm kind of in the middle of that journey myself at the moment. For us as insolvency practitioners, it's kind of a bit of a famine in terms of finding people. We've started offshore now, so we've got a team in India and a team in the Philippines that we're building out, and that talent gap that you're talking about is kind of your 12 months ago position where we're having to compete with lots of people in the market and pay what we'd expect to be overs to just fill seats at the moment. And we've had to go through that process of trimming and getting fat and trimming again, because you're right. It's finding that talent now for me is what you've experienced that 12 months ago. So fingers crossed, hopefully it turns in a different direction for me shortly.
Yeah.
In terms of like, if you're thinking about lifestyle choices as a business owner at the moment, I know you do a lot of extracurricular stuff in terms of reading and running, and you're into your Muay Thai and you're going to go do that for a few days in the next week or two. But what grounds you as a person and puts you in a position where you're continuing to drive Hitch forward? And obviously, where's that hunger come from?
I think the hunger comes from a long time ago. You see, you've either got it or you haven't, right? Yeah. You're either going to be an entrepreneur or you're not. Yeah. I don't think that's manufactured in any way, shape, or form. Mm-mm. It's probably the biggest roller coaster you'll ever experience in your life. One day you feel like you're the king of the world and you can take on anything. Yep. The other day you feel like you're the biggest failure and basically you should just shut it all down and go and live in a cabin in Tasmania.
Yeah.
And that's 10 years on, that's still the case. And it doesn't go. The peaks and troughs are less drastic, but it still exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think where you get to a point where in the early days you really stress and worry about that. And when you're flat, you're really flat. And when you're up, you're really up.
Yeah.
But then using things like exercise, and for me, it's a hybrid of things. So I don't like to just lift weights. I don't like to just run. I don't like to do sort of martial arts training with Muay Thai. I like to do a bit of everything. Yeah. I'm never going to be the fittest bloke in the room. I'm never going to be I'm never going to be an amazing athlete, but I will be pretty much a very well-rounded kind of healthy and active individual.
Yeah.
And for me, if I don't sort of do that at least 5 or 6 days a week in the morning, some form of physical movement, then I may as well not show up.
Yeah.
My decision-making ability is impaired. My ability to communicate effectively is impaired. I'm tired. I'm lethargic. I'm far more reactive. Whereas if I've taken, and for me it's mornings. I know some people like it in the afternoon, but for me I just can't. It hangs over me all day and I don't like it. But for me, if I can set up that morning correctly and have a little bit of time where I'm out in fresh air, I hurt myself, for want of a better word. In some way, shape or form, I physically put myself through my paces.
Yeah.
And I have a bit of thinking time, then that's what keeps me going. I can solve more things on a 10K run than I can in an 8-hour office day.
Absolutely.
Without doubt.
Yeah, and it's that it sets you up for the rest of the day in that we've had this discussion heaps of times at the end of our runs. You get to the end of your run and you're like, this feeling just washes over you where you're like, yeah, I've done this. Cool, I'm ready to start my day right now. And it's not the first time I've heard that from anyone. It's particularly for successful people and driven people. Lots of people start their day like that, and it's been a bedrock of their career and or life outside of work. And that for me is something I've got to do as well. And I notice it when I don't.
Yeah, I agree. But I think, one of the questions you asked me was, how do I continue to grow?
Yeah.
Like, what drives me to do that? Well, that's certainly various iterations of life experience, right? So when I left my studies and I started out, it was all about how much cash can you make.
Yep.
And then you go through various stages. I think the first law job I had, I earned $34,000 a year, and I'd have to
23,000 is what I was on.
It's and how you live on that is I don't know. But I do recall sort of making a decision as to whether I could afford a coffee at lunchtime if I'd had one in the morning or not, because literally the extra $3 was not available.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad place to be because it teaches you to be hungry.
Yeah.
And when you go on that holiday to Bali or wherever, it means so much more. Whereas then, so you fast forward 10 years later and you're awash with cash and you go, wow, I've got more money than I could ever dream of.
Yeah.
But that comes with its own problems, right?
Absolutely.
And you go, well, sure, got a nice car, got a nice house, got a nice watch, can go wherever I want in the world, whenever I want. But am I happy? Am I satisfied? And I can categorically say, and this is just for me, there are certainly a lot of my clients are far, far wealthier than I will ever even dream of being.
Yeah.
They are far more motivated by that continual growth of wealth. For me, it's not my motivator. Yeah. And so I've had to do a fair bit of heavy lifting over the last couple of years as to what is my primary motivator, because in one breath I say, well, yes, I am a businessman. Yes, I'm a commercial beast. Yes, I have an element of ego and I want to win. Yes, I have an element of greed and I want to get what's mine. Yeah. But ultimately, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Like, why do you run this thing? Like, go and do something else. And for me, it's really about that piece of building a team and creating a platform upon which other people can build their careers. Yeah. And some people might say that's odd and say, well, hang on a minute, is that what a lawyer should do? Should a lawyer, their primary driver be to build careers and create opportunities for other lawyers? And I would answer that and say, well, yeah, I think it's pretty much spot on.
It should be for every business owner. Yeah, in my view.
Well, I can't satisfy client needs unless I've created a platform in which the best lawyers in the market they're ready, willing and able and hungry to satisfy client needs.
Oh, absolutely. And I say this to my team all the time. I want you to be better than I am at some future point. And if I can put you in a position where you are better than I am, I've done my job. Yeah. A, it helps you. B, it definitely helps me because I'm building a practice that people want to be a part of. And obviously at the top end in terms of ability to deliver and ability to get results. And that's, it's something that I work on. I know you've got two beautiful young daughters too, so that's obviously something that probably drives you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you become a parent, particularly a dad of little girls, you kind of everything you thought was important gets realigned, and you realize that what they want more than anything is your undivided attention. So to my earlier point about, the overuse of mobile phones or the overuse of technology or being on the phone to a client at 6 o'clock doing an M&A deal when dinner's been served for them, you realize that though you're being observed, your energy is being taken in by them. They're probably reflecting back their energy. So if you're frustrated and stressed and busy, a kid, and in my experience, they're 3 and 7, but a young kid will effectively give you back the energy that you give them.
Yeah.
Going calm, you listen to them, you hear them, and then you ask them to go upstairs and have a bath and get ready for bed. No problem, Dad. If you go in on a phone trying to haggle out a $10 million M&A transaction, stressed, scratching the sides of your head with a furrowed brow, then when you ask them to go upstairs to go to bed, an hour later, you're going to be met with a tantrum on the mat on the floor as to given 100 reasons as to why not to go to bed. So I think what I've found there is that it's interesting because, often previously I'd find it, 3 or 4 hours on a Sunday to get the laptop out and crunch it in front of a movie while they were watching Disney.
Yeah.
And then I got to the point where, thankfully, I didn't have to because I had a team, right? And there are periods in life, and I want to cover this point in a minute, but there are periods in life where you have to grind.
Yeah.
And my level of grinding had subsided a bit. But now, that same Sunday Disney movie, I will watch it.
Yeah.
Because the bang for buck for me in terms of their satisfaction, if I've actually engaged and spoken about what the character's doing on the screen, is so much more than the 10 emails I got done.
Yep.
So it's being present, it's being attentive when you're there with them. It's giving them 100% of you. That's one thing. I mean, we've spoken a lot today about business and growth and what drives you and all of that kind of thing. One thing that a fundamental belief of mine is that anyone who is doing anything in business or some form of sort of pursuit, whether they be an artist or an athlete or a business person, I have a fundamental view that unless you are prepared to basically be addicted to it for at least a 5-year period, like it consumes you, you do it 6 days a week, 16 hours a day, you think about it, you sleep about it, you sleep with it in your mind, you talk about it.
Yeah.
Unless you're prepared to go through that hurt locker where basically you have to say no to social events, you have to say no to family events, you have to basically, taper your life so your life is purely the pursuit of that thing, it's not going to amount to much. Yeah. And certainly in my experience from 2015 to 2020, that was how I rolled. I did work 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, and it took a toll mentally. Yeah. But gee, like the fruits of the labour are worth it.
Well, the foundation's there, right? And that's the 5 years worth of the hurt locker that you've been in, and you make sacrifices, like you said, in other parts of your life to get to that point. And I don't disagree with you. I kind of feel like I'm in the middle of it still myself. But it's, at the end of the day, you've got to want to be in it 24/7 for it to be successful. And you see that all the time, right? Like some of your most successful clients, they're probably still doing it. And 5 years isn't the end game. It's probably 10.
Yeah, absolutely. In some of those bigger sort of businesses that are more speculative or more edgy or more aggressive than a professional services firm, the runway is often longer than 5.
Yeah.
But if you want to build a good prof services firm, you can do it in 5 if it's all you think about.
Yeah. No, I'm there with you, and I think I've got about a year and a half to go. So.
Well, there is light at the end of the tunnel because those CVs that are hard to get now, those good quality CVs, they just start to flow in the door. Then you get another series of scalability problems, which sort of we're at now. And, just this week we appointed a chief operating officer because
I saw that.
All of the back housekeeping stuff had been let go. And so, there's scalability issues, but it's a far more enjoyable challenge once you get over the 5-year hump.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of scalability, so you've done your COO, and well done on making that choice. It's not an easy one to make, and it comes with its own opportunity costs. But tell me a bit more about where you got to in terms of the scaling process and why you decided to make that decision.
Yeah, so what we sort of found is we took on a team in Adelaide in July. So we were working across 2 jurisdictions. And then we started to see a bigger delineation between our sort of core practice areas of commercial mergers and acquisitions, property, franchising, wills and estates, litigation and insolvency. So we sort of started to see those more traditional service lines that you might see in a larger law firm. Historically, everyone did a bit of everything, but you kind of inherently knew who to go to if you had a problem.
Yeah.
And then as we grew, it just happened that, you know, people's skill sets were delineated just based on experience and
the work they were doing.
The work they were doing, exactly. And so we started to have a situation where, you know, some of the work cross-functionally between the teams wasn't as streamlined as you'd like it. And then obviously just by virtue of the number of people in the shop, the HR queries and concerns and performance reviews and career progression plans and need for a parental leave policy and all of those things that are all fair and reasonable requests, they were falling on the shoulders of practicing, me.
Yeah.
And you get to the point where you can't do business development, service clients and run the operations of a law firm. Something will fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And what was falling through the cracks for me, because ultimately the operational responsibility fell on me, was that piece. People were waiting months to have a performance plan sent back to them or a career progression plan sent back to them. They were waiting months for the implementation of the parental leave plan, all stuff that in isolation it's not going to kill the law firm, but it's not going to lead to ultimate satisfaction for your people. And so I kind of took the view that there are various hires we could have made. We could have put in another rainmaker, could have, you know, opened in Brisbane. We could have, various other things that we could have done.
Yeah, other strategic decisions you got to make.
But for us, I sat back and I thought, well, what do you need more than anything? What's consuming your time more than anything?
People.
It was people. It was the human piece. It was the human and systemization piece. And for us, we got it to sort of 35 people.
Before you took that step.
Before we took it. And I'm exceptionally glad we did.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you this in terms of my experience. By having someone in that kind of role, you'll have other problems that come up and they'll all be good problems, but taking away some of the people element, because you obviously you're still going to have it, it's just not on the same level. It takes a whole weight off your shoulders and allows you to make more informed decisions about all sorts of other things, because you're not having to deal with, I've got to take leave this week because I've got to go get an operation, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that, or someone's sick, or whatever that might be. I found that was taking up 50% of my time, 25% and is doing the work, and 25% is trying to win more work. So by freeing yourself of that, for, like I said, you're not going to be freed of all of it, but it gives you a lot more headspace to think about other things. And you'll see your business will be 50 people next time I'm sitting down having this kind of conversation with you. Yeah,
it really hinders growth, because all you can do is focus on the past and the present. You can't, when you're in that state, you can't focus on the future. And so hopefully I'm very hopeful that that's what I can spend some time on now. I can spend some time. I've got a very good team in terms of execution of the work. I've got an emerging team in terms of business development and winning the work. But, for me, it's about getting out there and saying, okay, well, how do we grow?
And speaking of the future, what's that look like for you think?
Yeah, well, as I sort of said to you, my primary motivator is not money. So I'm never going to be the guy that sits here and tells you that I'm going to have 500 people and I'm going to do revenue of, 200 million and, net profit of 60 mil, and that's how it's going to roll, because that's not my primary motivator. For me, it's about organically growing into markets that make sense for us. And so probably what I can see in my mind's eye in 5 years is certainly, Sydney being in the vicinity of perhaps double what it is now, perhaps 60 people.
Yep.
Adelaide probably being, 20 to 30, Melbourne being 20 to 30, and there's probably even a logical step into Brisbane at that point in time. I've found that I can understand and get my head around law firms of, sort of 20, 30, 40 people. There still seems to be enough that people can connect with each other and interact with each other well. I've had experience in firms of 200, 300, 400, 500, and it gets lost.
Yeah.
And what you've got to be cautious of in this market in law firms, particularly with AI on, coming down flat out, is that you don't create this big machine that's just the same as everybody else. And so for me, it's more about grow organically into the markets where you've got good human relationships.
Yeah.
Because for the next 20 years, a law firm is going to become purely a human interaction-based business. There's no money in the documentation at all.
Yeah, because that'll be taken care of by a machine at some point. And
well, it already is.
Yeah.
I mean, you can spit a shareholders agreement in 15 minutes.
Yep.
But the client won't pay for that. What the client will pay for is the coaching and the counselling around what they should have in the shareholders agreement,
yep,
how it's going to be received when they send it to half a dozen other shareholders, and basically the negotiation back and forth between shareholders.
Yeah, the pain points, and that's what you do as an individual. You're particularly good at it, and you've touched on it earlier. Your negotiation style is, hey, let's all sit down, let's get around a table, let's have a cup of coffee and try and nut out a deal that works for everyone. So I think you're well placed to go down that path, and obviously I look forward to seeing it in 5 years' time. Hopefully we can have another conversation like this and you can tell me you're at 200 people, but you're still in a position where your culture's awesome and everyone enjoys working for you or with you.
That's where I'd like to be. I'd like to be, self-funded, healthy culture, excellent reputation amongst clients and peers.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not seeking this magical kind of unicorn of a law firm. I just want to be the best in the business for our size.
Yeah, and for your clients, and obviously delivering results, which is always front of mind.
Absolutely,
mate. Really, really, really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. I know you've got things to do, but again, thanks so much for coming on, and looking forward to seeing where you go in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Thank you. And likewise, it's been an absolute pleasure. And as always, both from a business perspective, I really love working with you, and even more so from a personal perspective. Some of the chats and stuff we have when we run around the beaches is really, really valuable. And I'm of the view that as you get older, you have a smaller circle of close friends and people that you can lean on when stuff goes sideways. And I'm definitely grateful for you in that regard. So
the 2 Ring Club, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for tuning into Cathro & Partners The Cut. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. For more insights, please visit cathropartners.com.au or feel free to like our LinkedIn and other social pages.